Imagine this scenario. It's Saturday. You've had a long week, so you decide to do exactly what everyone tells you to do. You clear your schedule, you turn off your phone, you sleep for 10 solid hours. You wake up, and for a fleeting second you think, okay, I should be good. But then you try to sit up, and it feels like gravity has been turned up to 11. Your limbs feel like lead, your brain is swimming in a thick fog, and you realize with this sinking feeling that the rest didn't do anything. The battery didn't charge.
That is the classic heartbreaking paradox of adrenal insufficiency.
And that is exactly what we are digging into today. We are looking at a really insightful piece from My Adrenal Life titled Resting with Adrenal Insufficiency, Why It Doesn't Always Help. It tackles this massive misconception that if you're tired, you just need a nap. But for people with this condition, the math isn't that simple. I'm Noah.
And I'm Eloise. It's great to be here to unpack this.
So, Eloise, I think most of us operate on a very basic model of energy. You exert yourself, you get tired. You sleep, you recharge. It's like a checking account. You spend money, you deposit money. But this article suggests that for someone with adrenal insufficiency, or AI, as we'll call it, the bank is permanently frozen.
That's a good analogy, but I might tweak it. It's not just that the bank is frozen, it's that the currency itself is different. In a healthy body, cortisol is the currency. We tend to think of cortisol as just the stress hormone, the bad guy that makes us anxious. But physiologically, cortisol is life. It's the ignition switch for almost every energy process in your body.
Right. We associate it with fight or flight, but you're saying it's doing the heavy lifting even when we're just sitting on the couch?
Exactly, and this is where the My Adrenal Life article really shines. It distinguishes between tiredness and metabolic fatigue. When you run a marathon, you're tired. Your muscles have lactic acid. Your brain has adenosine buildup. Sleep clears that away. But in adrenal insufficiency, the fatigue stems from a lack of metabolic fuel. The cortisol isn't there to tell your cells to unlock the energy reserves. So you can sleep for days, but if the key to the gas tank is missing, the cart isn't going anywhere.
That's a terrifying distinction. Before we get too deep into the mechanics of that fuel line, though, we should probably set the stage. What exactly is happening in the body to cause this deficiency? The article mentions a few types.
So at the most basic level, adrenal insufficiency means your adrenal glands, these little walnut-sized organs sitting on top of your kidneys, aren't producing enough hormones. The most famous form is primary adrenal insufficiency, also known as Addison's disease. That's usually autoimmune. Your body attacks the glands until they're destroyed. That's what John F. Kennedy had, actually.
Kennedy? I knew he had back problems, but I didn't realize he had Addison's.
He did, and he hid it very well. But there are other forms. There's secondary adrenal insufficiency, which is actually a problem with the pituitary gland in the brain. The pituitary is like the manager. It sends a memo, a hormone called ACTH, down to the adrenals telling them to work. If the manager is asleep, the workers don't work. And then there's a third type, which is becoming increasingly common, called iatrogenic or tertiary adrenal insufficiency.
Iatrogenic meaning caused by doctors?
Essentially, yes. It's caused by medical treatment. If you take high-dose steroids for a long time, for asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, or after an organ transplant, your body's natural feedback loop gets lazy. It sees all this synthetic steroid floating around and says, oh, I guess I don't need to make my own cortisol anymore. If you stop those meds too fast, your internal production doesn't wake up in time. You're left with zero cortisol.
Okay, so let's go back to the rest problem. The article mentions that cortisol regulates blood sugar and metabolism. I want to drill down on that. Why does low cortisol make me feel like I've been hit by a truck, even if I haven't moved?
This is the technical breakdown we need to have. It's about a process called gluconeogenesis. It's a mouthful, but it basically means creating new glucose. When you haven't eaten for a while, like while you're sleeping, your body runs out of the easy sugar from your last meal. A healthy body then switches to backup power. It takes fats and proteins and converts them into glucose to keep your brain and heart running. Cortisol is the hormone that flips that switch.
I see where this is going. If you don't have cortisol,
The switch never flips. You sleep, your blood sugar drops, and instead of mobilizing reserves, your body just runs empty. You wake up hypoglycemic, shaky, and chemically exhausted because your cells have been starving all night. No amount of resting fixes that starvation. You need cortisol to unlock the fuel.
That explains the waking up tired part perfectly. But the article also talks about daily rhythms. It mentions that hormone replacement therapy, the pills people take, can't match nature. Why is that? We can put a man on the moon. Why can't we mimic a hormone curve?
It is surprisingly difficult. In a healthy person, cortisol isn't a flat line. It follows a circadian rhythm. It spikes massively right before you wake up. This is called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. It's like your body's natural espresso shot at 6 a.m. Then it tapers off gently throughout the day.
And a pill is just a blunt instrument?
Exactly. You take a hydrocortisone pill at 7 a.m. It spikes your levels sky high for 2 hours, and then it crashes. It has a very short half-life, maybe 90 minutes. So you go from superhero to zero by 11 a.m., you take another pill, another spike, another crash. You're constantly riding a roller coaster, whereas a healthy body is cruising on a gentle slope. That roller coaster is exhausting in itself.
it sounds like trying to water a delicate plant with a fire hose, then waiting 3 days, then fire hosing it again.
That is a perfect analogy. And that disconnect, that gap between the pill and the biological need, is where the fatigue lives. You might be resting on the couch, but if your cortisol has bottomed out because your last dose wore off, your blood pressure drops, your brain fogs over, and you feel like you're dying. Rest doesn't raise blood pressure. Cortisol does.
This feels like a good moment to look backward. I'm always curious about how we figured this out. I mean, before we had blood tests, this must have just looked like a mysterious wasting away. Who discovered this?
It's a fascinating, albeit tragic, story. It goes back to 1855 to a physician named Thomas Addison at Guy's Hospital in London. He was this brilliant, shy, somewhat depressive man who was observing patients who had this strange constellation of symptoms: severe weakness, low blood pressure, and this very specific bronzing of the skin.
Bronzing? Like a tan?
Yes, hyperpigmentation. It happens because when the brain screams for cortisol and doesn't get it, it pumps out so much ACTH, that manager hormone we talked about, that it accidentally stimulates melanin production too. It's a chemical spillover. Addison noticed this bronze skin paired with fatal fatigue. At the time, the main cause was tuberculosis destroying the adrenal glands. He published a monograph on it, on the constitutional and local effects of disease of the suprarenal capsules, but it wasn't immediately embraced.
And there was no treatment then, right? If you had it in 1855,
You died. It was 100% fatal. There was no synthetic cortisol until the late 1940s and early 50s. Addison himself never saw a cure. In fact, he suffered from severe depression, which we now know can be a symptom of hormonal imbalance, though his was likely more complex. And he committed suicide in 1860. It's a heavy legacy. The man who identified the disease of fatigue succumbed to his own mental anguish.
That is incredibly heavy. But it also highlights the psychological component that the article touches on. It talks about the frustration, the self-doubt. When you have a disease that was once fatal and is now manageable, I imagine people expect you to just be fine.
Right. You have your pills. Why aren't you normal? That's the external pressure. The article mentions that patients feel dismissed or misunderstood. And this brings us to the concept of invisible illness. If you saw someone with a cast on their leg, you wouldn't ask them to run a sprint. But someone with AI looks normal. They might even look great. Maybe they have a nice tan from the ACTH, or maybe they're a bit puffy from the steroids.
So when they say, I can't go out tonight, I'm fatigued, friends hear, I'm lazy or I'm flaky.
Exactly. And the patient starts to internalize that. The article talks about self-doubt. Am I doing something wrong? Am I just weak? But physiologically, their body is in a state of crisis management. There's a theory in the chronic illness community called the spoon theory, the idea that you start the day with a limited number of spoons, representing energy units. A shower costs a spoon. Making breakfast costs two. For someone with AI, just regulating their blood pressure while standing up might cost 3 spoons. They run out before noon.
And the article makes a point that I found really interesting. Sometimes prolonged rest makes it worse. Forced inactivity can increase stiffness, heaviness, or mental fog. Why is that? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but think about circulation and metabolism. Cortisol helps maintain vascular tone, the tightness of your blood vessels. When you lie down for a long time, your blood pressure naturally lowers. For an AI patient who already struggles with low blood pressure, prolonged bed rest can make them hemodynamically unstable. When they finally try to stand up, their blood vessels don't constrict properly to pump blood to the brain. So they get dizzy, foggy, and feel heavier than before. Light movement can sometimes actually help signal the body to keep the pressure up.
So it's a tightrope walk. You can't overexert or you crash. You can't overrest or you stagnate.
And you have to do this tightrope walk while manually dosing your own life support hormones based on how you think you might feel in 2 hours. It's a massive cognitive load. That mental effort, constantly scanning your body, asking, do I need 5 milligrams more hydrocortisone? Did I eat enough salt? That in itself causes fatigue.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the iatrogenic cases, the doctor-caused cases. The article lists this as a major category. Are we seeing more of this?
We absolutely are. We are living in the age of inflammation. And steroids are the magic bullet for inflammation. Prednisone, hydrocortisone, dexamethasone. They are miracle drugs for asthma, autoimmune diseases, skin conditions, even cancer treatments. But because they work so well, they are prescribed widely. And if a patient is on them for months and then just stops or tapers too fast, their adrenal glands are effectively asleep. We are seeing a significant rise in this tertiary adrenal insufficiency. It's a silent epidemic within the chronic illness world.
And for those people, the shock must be intense. They thought they were curing asthma, and now they have a hormone deficiency.
Right. And often they don't get the same education as someone diagnosed with Addison's disease. An Addison patient is told, this is for life, here's your emergency injection kit. Someone tapering off prednisone might just be told, you'll feel groggy for a bit. They might not realize they are in genuine adrenal failure until they end up in the ER.
The article references adrenal crisis as the extreme end of this. What is that exactly? Is that just extreme fatigue?
No, an adrenal crisis is a medical emergency. It's shock. If your body encounters a stressor, a car accident, a stomach flu, even a bad emotional breakup, and it cannot produce cortisol, your blood pressure bottoms out. You start vomiting, you lose consciousness, and your organs start to shut down. It is fatal if not treated with IV steroids immediately. And the scary part is the symptoms of a looming crisis, extreme fatigue, nausea, body aches, look a lot like just having the flu.
Which brings us back to the rest myth. If you think you just have the flu and decide to sleep it off, that could be the most dangerous thing you do.
Exactly. This is why the advice, just rest, is dangerous for this community. If you are experiencing bone-deep exhaustion, it might be a sign you are under-replaced and need medication, not a nap. Sleeping it off could mean slipping into a coma.
That is a sobering reality check. So what is the takeaway here? The article ends on a note of validation, trying to reduce frustration. If rest isn't the cure, what is the strategy? Is there hope for better treatments?
There is hope. Technology is slowly catching up. There are new delivery systems being researched, like subcutaneous pumps, similar to insulin pumps for diabetics, that can drip cortisol in a circadian rhythm, pulsing it overnight so you wake up with fuel in the tank. There are also delayed release tablets that you take at bedtime, which release at 4 a.m. to mimic that natural spike. These aren't accessible to everyone yet, but they show that medicine understands the problem.
And until then, for the person reading this article today,
The strategy is pacing and self-knowledge. It's realizing that your energy envelope is smaller than other people's. And that is not a moral failing, it's physics. It means learning your specific symptoms of low cortisol versus simple tiredness. It means communicating with your loved one, saying, I am not lazy, I am chemically depleted. And honestly, it means grieving the loss of that carefree energy. Once you accept that your body runs on a different operating system, you can stop fighting it and start managing it.
I think that's a powerful place to land. It's about redefining what
recovery looks like. It's not just closing your eyes, it's checking your levels, timing your meds, and respecting the biology. To everyone listening who might be dealing with this or who knows someone who is, hopefully this gives you some vocabulary to explain why just resting isn't always the answer.
Absolutely. Validation is the first step to feeling better.
If this conversation opened your eyes to the invisible mechanics of adrenal insufficiency, send this episode to a friend, maybe even that friend who is always too tired to go out. It might just change how you see them. Thanks for listening.